Not me. Oh, where'd my attendance go? There it is. All right, hey, really quick. Hey, guys. Really quick. I feel like this class kind of got gutted. I feel like there are more people in it. Soccer. Well, soccer girls are coming back tomorrow. Really? Yeah. They found out that the girl who was positive from Traders was a bench warmer, and so, like, didn't interact with any. It's good for us, because we get them back, right? No, but, like, seriously, it was her first year ever playing soccer, and so she never interacted with anyone. She was stationary, is what they said. They didn't actually tell us who. But, so, no one who was on the field ever got interacted. Huh? Because of Traders. Like, we're still in school. They're on e-learning now. Come on over to us. That would be, partly, that would be impressive. Like, that level of deception. All right, Bird, Brooklyn. But Bird isn't in here. Why is he? Whatever. Daniel, Evan, Caleb, Bree, Kayla, Trey, Austin, Maddie, Amelia, Joanne, Kevin, Luke, Tim, Elijah. Okay, so they're only missing 2. Oh, that's not bad.
You don't have to take the SAT or ACT. We don't have to take the SAT or ACT. Even schools and DC schools are no longer required. Wait, what is SAT and ACT? Right now it's just Division 1 and Division 2. No, not. For sports or for school? Like that. All schools. Division 1 and Division 2.
All right, guys. If you would, put your mask on real quick and get out your commonplace book, please. Yeah. 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 Yep. All right. All right, guys. So today what we want to do is talk a little bit more about longing and what that actually is. Want to talk through some examples, why it's important, so on and so forth. And then tomorrow what we're going to do is we're going to get into talking about distractions and then the rest of this thesis, which is the centered on a personal being type. And I think actually that we're going to get done with knowledge a day early. So whatever day 4 is will be probably like a work day or like a reading day or a meeting day if you want to. So we'll see how today and tomorrow go though. So yeah. All right. Got no one. Let me know they're here. But first let's start with prayer. All right, so pray with me. Almighty God, you have given your only Son to be for us a sacrifice for sin, and also an example of godly life. Give us grace to receive thankfully the fruits of his redeeming work, and to follow daily in the blessed steps of his most holy life. Through Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord, who lives and reigns with you, and the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. All right, so let's start with a quick, review of yesterday. When we talk about longing, where does longing come from? Like, what is the tension in our experience that produces longing? This might be important. Maybe if you wrote this down yesterday in your commonplace book, which if you didn't, that's one of the most important things we talked about yesterday, or this is one of the most important things we talked about yesterday. What was your question? Where does this longing come from? Yeah. Self-awareness is a part of that. Self-awareness is the thing that allows us to acknowledge that we are longing beings. But it's not necessarily the foundation of where we come from, of where this longing comes from. It comes from the tension between two things that are seemingly contradictory. Yes, the duality of man, right? What is the duality of man? Caleb. What is the duality of man? Absolutely. When Pascal says that humanity by nature is wretched completely because of the fall, but also has this really significant value. It has this greatness within us because we're made in the image of God. What that does is that butts heads in our experience, because when we talk about the Proust questionnaire, right, and our answers to it, we know that some of them are bad, but we know that some of them are good. So how do we understand our experience? Well, the key to understanding that, as Kevin said, is self-awareness. Self-awareness is the thing that allows us, when we experience self-awareness, we now recognize that we are longing beings. That we're not as good as we want to be, or that there is something just ahead of us that is attainable, but we have yet to attain it. That's what longing is. All right? So here's another question that we didn't go through yesterday, but I think can be kind of presumed based off of our stuff yesterday. What is the purpose of longing? Like, what's the goal of longing? If we acknowledge that we are longing beings, why do we long? We didn't really talk about this much yesterday.
It wasn't the thesis you said, was it?
No. The thesis is more of just what human longing, why do we long, or what human longing does for us. But that's more about what it reveals to us, less about the purpose of it, personally, for us. What does our longing, what does our desire tell us about ourselves?
That we need purpose.
That we need purpose? Where do we get purpose? Where do we find meaning? I don't know, whatever. What do you think? I mean, I think ultimately, yes. Like, that's what we'll talk about. But we find purpose, we find meaning in our experiences and other things that we encounter in our life, right? I think God is like the epitome of that, and through a Christian worldview, that's what we would argue. Like, our purpose, our meaning comes from that, or comes from our relationship with Him. But at the end of the day, I think the purpose of longing, why we long, is because we desire to be happy. We desire satisfaction. We desire fulfillment. The word that we've used for this is we desire like selfhood. We desire to like know who we are, to know what our experiences are, to know why we go through the things that we do. That's a part of like that purpose of why we suffer or why we long. So let me ask this question to kind of get us started for today. Also, anything that we ever like review will probably be really important for like, I don't know, like a unit quiz in like 2 or 3 weeks. So it might be worth just like maybe even noting that stuff down if you haven't yet, but it's up to you. So here's the question I want to offer. And it's kind of in the form of a statement. I want you to either say, yeah, I disagree with that, or I agree with that. If human beings are conscious of our longing, so if we're self-aware, which again, not everyone is. Not everyone is awake. Not everyone has their eyes opened. But if we are conscious of that longing, this would suggest that there is some sort of distant, like we have yet to attain it, or implicit, like it's within us, understanding of what would make us happy. Do you agree or disagree with that statement? Yes. If human beings are conscious of their longing, this would suggest that there is some distant or implicit understanding of what would make us happy, or that something can make us happy. Do you agree or disagree with that? Yeah.
I agree.
Okay, why? Because. All right, cool. Anyone else? I'm just kidding. Why? So what this question is really asking, right, is that if we know that we are longing beings, we also know through that longing that there is something that will make us happy.
Yes.
Okay, but why yes? Yeah. Like the looking just implies that there hopefully is something that exists that might make us happy. Yeah, I think that's good. The fact that you're looking shows that there might be something. It's like if you are if you are looking for love, right? If you are trying to find a partner, something like that. It doesn't mean that there isn't anyone out there for you. It probably means that there is someone or something out there that can fulfill that. If it's a person, like another person, maybe, hopefully. I hope all of you get to experience the reality of marriage. But some of you might not. Like, that's the harsh reality of this. So then what happens if you don't? Well, that desire for love, does that mean that you just can't be happy? I hope that's not the case. Because if that's the case, then that's rough. So maybe there's something else that can still satisfy, but it doesn't negate the reality, as Daniel was saying, that yes, there's something because we long. The question isn't if there is something, but it's what that thing is, I think.
But if you want something so bad, then
Okay. Okay. Let's say this is a person, like a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever else. If you want that person so bad, but they have no interest in you, how do you just get them? Yeah, but you can, but that's illegal, right?
money.
Also, yes, there are joking responses to that, but also in a very serious way, that creates a really difficult reality. That, even though we might want things, we don't always have a means of getting it, because sometimes that thing doesn't want us. Right? So, what I'm talking about is specifically just with, a relationship, in that sense. Maybe even a friendship, right? I mean, it's true. Not everyone wants to be friends with us because maybe there's something with personality or whatever. If we're talking about, so here's the thing, if we're talking about stuff, like things, shoes, clothes, cars, sure. But then what you find is that the moment that you get that thing that you feel like, oh, I didn't know I was going to be able to get this, but now I can. Great. Does that longing go away? Not usually. Usually, I encounter this with my kids all the time. So my son is really into Nerf guns right now, which is amazing because I love shooting them with him, and it's fantastic. But he just got this for his birthday, this $40 Nerf gun that's it has batteries in it, so it's automatic, and so it just shoots. You don't even have to cock it or anything. It just shoots. Played with it for a day or two. It was the best thing ever. Now he's already on to the next thing. I think that it can be I think that it is with everything that we can buy, right? Or that we can obtain in this world. I think we do that with people as well. It can be, absolutely. Because we think that I want this person right now more than anything. That will satisfy my longing or my desires. Then I get that person, and what I find is actually I really didn't want that person, I just wanted the attention. And so now I'll shrug that person to the side and seek, oh, I really want this thing, this person. And so I go to there, right? And we do that all of the time. This is getting a little bit away from the question that I started with, but I think that it's really important because what we actually do is we mistake our longing in that search for happiness and what we'll call deep sustainable joy with we mistake it with a temporary fix. And I'm not trying to get into the cheesy cliche Christian worldly things, right? But I mean we do that. Not just with stuff, but with people. I would even say we do that with food all the time, right? We do that with everything that we encounter because we mistake that thing as being the thing that will make us happy or the thing that will satisfy us completely, our longing. But in reality, and C.S. Lewis says this, that thing that we say, okay, this is what I trust to make me satisfied or to make me happy is actually just a signpost to something else. So that love, that person, if I were to say my wife is that thing, what happens when my wife dies? I have no possibility of happiness. And so, but it also doesn't say that I shouldn't love my wife. Like, there's like a cynicism or despair that comes from this to where we can't just say, oh, because this thing will not fully satisfy me or fully make me happy like for the rest of my life, I'm just not going to be a part of that. That's what draws people away in cynicism from like reaching out and being friends with people or like being adventurous in life and things like that, because there's always a fear of like being hurt. But we have to like properly place these things. So the idea that happiness is the goal of our longing, I think is really great, because there's something out there that can make us happy, that does give us that fulfillment and that satisfaction. But again, the question is not, isn't is there something, because we know that there is, but what is that thing? And I think for a lot of us it's trial and error a lot of the time, until a certain point. Augustine says that best. Our hearts are restless, O God, until the thing that actually gives us rest, which, spoiler alert, he says it's God. That's a really tricky place to be in, because then we try to find that fulfillment and find that happiness in things. But even though you're right, Daniel, I think that we always feel that coming up again, and like it happens all the time. Like that's just a natural thing, that if I get something, like I get bored with it and I move on to the next thing. It doesn't always. Like I haven't gotten bored with my wife yet. 11 years. Yeah, 11 years this past May. And I probably won't. But at the same time, like the satisfaction and the happiness that I get from her and the fulfillment of my longing that I get from her, it's not complete fulfillment, because that would be a lie. That's what we get into when we talk about this thing called false happiness. Okay, so let me ask you guys this. Can you think of an example of like false happiness from like books, movies, TV, anything, or just life in general? Someone before said drugs. Like that's like low-hanging fruit. I agree with that. But like at the same time, like there are a lot more reasons like why people encounter and engage with that type of stuff. For escaping, for numbing. But also, I think that those are also like false happiness. To not think about the problems and troubles and issues and difficulties that I have in my life would make some people happy. Ignorance is bliss, right? What else? False happiness. Traveling? What do you mean? How is traveling false happiness?
Kind of like you said, escapism. So if you're like taking it to a serious level, like constantly distracting yourself with new settings, new experiences, and new cultures, is going to keep you out of your head.
Yeah. I think you can have the inverse effect on some people too, to where it like stokes that longing. Like it's like a catalyst for that, because now I realize how small I am and how big the world is, and it makes me want to do more. But I think that that's true. It can be escapism for some people if they're running away from something. Yeah, absolutely. What else? False happiness. Think about like movies and books too, right? Like this is a big part of most like literature and art. Yeah.
Like when you watch a movie and they like find something at the end or something like that, and it's like a good ending.
Mm-hmm.
When the movie ends, you're kind of like sad, because like you think it could have something to do with it, because they found what they were longing for, and we found what we're longing for.
Yeah, that's a great example. That's a great example. I think of like the difference between. I apologize if like anyone in here like enjoys this movie, but like I hate The Notebook. I'm sorry, Brooklyn. I told you I apologize beforehand, so it's okay for me to say that. That's like saying, I don't mean to be offensive. No offense, but, and then I say something brutally offensive, right? Like, but I said no offense. Should be okay. But The Notebook is a brutal movie because it ends perfectly. Like, life isn't perfect like that. If you want to see a really good love movie, don't watch The Notebook or like Nicholas Sparks. Watch La La Land.
Yes.
It's a great love movie. But it doesn't end sad. It just doesn't end perfect. Because... No, because they were both happy at the end. Even though they weren't together, we were sad because they ended up together. Oh, it's like 10 years old, relax. Shut up. Because even though they don't end up together, they're still happy. Because they give that look to each other at the end and like smile and nod their head and then walk away on their separate lives. We hate it, but it's still a happy ending. Now here's the thing. Gabe, what you were talking about more, though, is the idea that someone in the movie finds the thing that makes them happy, but, like, we leave thinking, I don't have that. Yeah. I think that is a really great point about movies, and movies, books, music as well, right? Like any piece of art, to where we can engage with it, and the fulfillment that the person in the art piece or whatever it is that we're engaging with, they find that and they have that. It emphasizes and highlights to us our lack of that. We all have, hopefully. Because like that's like what happens with TV shows. But that's also why TV shows are like this other world, is that in some ways we can connect to them in really powerful ways, like that, through lacking. Like this person has what I want. Maybe not like a thing, like a job, a wife, a husband, a house, whatever, but like happiness or like joy, and like I'm still searching for that. Art is a great revealer, like, of longing. We'll talk about that in a second with the poem that I even gave you. But I think more so, the false happiness that we get is like, have you guys ever seen Bolt?
Yeah.
About the dog, Miley Cyrus, right, the cartoon? That is a fantastic movie, and it's all about false happiness. Because the dog, Bolt, lives in a fake world. He's an actor and thinks it's all real, right? Until he gets out of it and realizes that, like, everything isn't about him. And remember there's that scene where he I think it's that he barks at the car and like it does nothing. And he's like, wait, what am I doing? What happened? Something wrong? And like realizes that it was all fake, and then goes through this like deep depression as a dog, but whatever. And then actually finds like that hope and that purpose at the end when he saves the little girl, right? Because of the fire, right? I just recently watched this movie because my kids love the movie. It's a great movie. So have you guys ever seen The Giver? Or read the book? I think you read the book at the school here, right? I mean, the book is the same way. That is all false happiness. But it's happiness by means of removing all emotion from negative emotion, or really just any emotion, from the world. That's why in the movie it's all gray for the first like hour. And then the moment that he meets the giver and like realizes that like sadness and joy and pain and sorrow, then it turns like this really vibrant color. That's a beautiful part of this movie. Is that like it literally shows you what happens when you bring into when you take into consideration the entirety of our experience. It makes the world shine brighter. Trees are greener, the sky is bluer, people are brighter. It's beautiful. Movies do that to us in a weird way where they show us what we lack or what we could have. That's a really great point. I like that. What else? Other false happiness. I have a really specific example. I'm gonna play it for you. Have you guys ever seen the movie The Truman Show?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about.
The Truman Show, if you haven't seen it.
Good morning, good afternoon, good
Yeah.
evening.
Good morning. If I don't see you again, good morning, afternoon, and good night.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. If you haven't seen The Truman Show, it's on Netflix. Highly suggest watching it. Jim Carrey, late 90s. This is, so the premise of this, the scene that I'm going to show you is from later in the movie. But the premise of it is a guy is born in a bubble, and his entire life is a reality show. The catch is that he's the only one who doesn't know that everything is fake. He thinks he's just living his normal life. Whereas everyone around him, his wife, his kids, his best friend, are all actors. It is. This was actually, this movie existed, I think this movie came out in like 98 or 99, and it was before the onset of like reality TV. The only reality TV show that existed, I think, when this was on was like Real World, like on MTV that used to exist. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that, whatever. So this is a bit dystopian in its like genre, but also it's really important to like engage with because this is the moment, or this is like kind of like the climactic moment where Truman realizes that things just don't match up. And for him throughout the movie, his happiness feels fake because he's really like searching for something else. For him, it's a love, like a person, like like love. Because the person who he fell in love with, who wasn't his wife, because his wife was chosen for him, in like a way that sets up, that doesn't make sense, but yeah. But he falls in love with this other woman, and she's kicked off the show, right? So she's killed off. And so he has this like longing for her. This is kind of the climactic moment of that where it begins to all break apart. But yeah, just watch this.
You're not well. Why do you want this baby to stay? You can't stand me.
That's not true.
Oof.
Why don't you let me fix you some of this cocoa drink. All natural cocoa beans from the upper slopes of Mount Nicaragua. No artificial sweeteners.
What the hell are you talking about?
Oh yeah, sorry, there's cursing in this. You guys are seniors though. Whatever. Get over it.
This is the best.
Shut up.
What does this have to do with anything? Tell me what's happening!
Well, you're having a nervous breakdown. That's what's happening.
You're part of this, aren't you?
Ruben! You are scaring me!
You're scaring me, Meryl. What are you gonna do? Dice me? Slice me or peel me? So many choices!
Do something!
What you saying? Who are you talking to?
Listen, I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything. No, I didn't talk. I wasn't talking to anybody. Don't talk to me! Tell anything, please stop.
This is his best friend. When anything comes up, he always shows up with a 6-pack of beer to talk.
Oh, my God. I'm going to expect me to carry on under these conditions. It's not professional.
So this is the point in the movie where like he begins to break down and realize that the happiness that he's felt isn't actually satisfying him because it's fake. It's not reality. Because his life is too perfect. Evan, what were you going to say? Yeah, it is. But it's fantastic. The movie as a whole is great anyways. So here's the point of all of this. When we talk about like this false happiness or, portrayed in movies really well, but even in our own lives, when we talk about the fulfillment of our longing being like stuff or people or things or whatever else, ideas, knowledge even, degrees, whatever that might be, what we find is that we desire happiness, but we don't desire one that is contrary to reality. Because happiness comes in a lot of different forms, and sometimes it includes pain. Sometimes it includes suffering. Sometimes it includes being annoyed at the people you love the most. And the fact that if we say, oh, no, I am fully satisfied by a lie, what that means is that we're not necessarily like satisfied our longing is satisfied, or our longing is fulfilled, right? But it's that what we desire with a lie is perfect, if I can spell it, perfect satisfaction, which is complete satisfaction. The difficulty is that if we understand longing, kind of what Daniel said before, it's never perfectly satisfied. It's never completely satisfied in this life. The Christian worldview will say, well, we have complete and perfect satisfaction, or the possibility of it. But again, not in this life. This is the hard part, right, is that even through faith in Jesus, our longing isn't completely taken away. We still long. Jesus satisfies us, right? But not completely. Because, I'm a Christian. I love Jesus. But at the same time, I still long for stuff. But for me, it's a little bit different now than it was before I became a Christian. The longing actually intensifies after I've become a person of faith. Because now, I know, I get a taste of, what is to come. Paul calls this the already not yet, right? That we have, these blessings of the future existence, with Jesus when he comes back now, because the kingdom of God has come to earth now, and it is now the kingdom of God. But this is why, when I watch movies, I don't, when I have a moment of joy, I'm not just oh, okay, that was cool. All right, I'm good. But, I want more of it. Not because I know that that's the thing that satisfies me, the joy itself or the event itself, but it's because I know that through this lens of the Christian worldview, everything that I do now has the possibility of giving me meaning, right? And of giving me intense, deep, sustainable joy. So hanging out with my friends no longer just becomes about in that moment I find joy and now I'm satisfied. But it's about wanting it more and more. It's like eating a really good meal. It's like going to Ruth's Chris and being oh gosh, okay, I'm satisfied. Good. That was good. That was good. And then never eating again. Well, no, it happens, like I get hungry the next day, even if I eat a big meal, right? Like I still get hungry. That craving comes back. It will never fully be satisfied until the day, Christian language, until the day that Jesus returns. Because we're always going to be wanting more of him. But the irony with faith is that fire, that burning, that longing actually intensifies after you come to faith in Jesus. Yeah.
Do you think, the more we have, the more we long?
That's a really great question. So, do I think that the more that we have, the more that we long? Not necessarily. I think that, because I think that there are people who have very little who long. And not just for food, right? But for just as a human, they long. But I think that the more that we have, the more we might be finding things that fulfill us momentarily, but then we just keep gathering things. I think a really interesting thesis paper might be and this is, I don't think where you're going with that, but I have a couple people in my family who are hoarders. And part of the reason they hoard is because they think that everything they have has value, or it gives their life meaning and value. That'd be a really interesting thesis, idea, to compare hoarding with this misplaced object of longing. It'd be interesting. So I think yes and no, but I really just think it depends on the individual. It depends on them, because whether in scarcity or excess, I don't know if that magnifies or intensifies the longing. I think that we all long for stuff. It's just a matter of what we fill that with. Some of us fill it with more stuff. Some of us fill it with knowledge. Some of us fill it with people. So on and so forth. So I think it's a really great question. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think you can be fully satisfied, I'm saying, if you're a Christian, with Jesus, because I say, that's the only way to be really satisfied.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can be, actually satisfied. Can you be fully satisfied on earth?
Well, that's where we get into this thing called the complexity of longing, which is just the next part of this, what I'm talking about. And one of the main points, and I'll just write it out now, one of the main points that I'll conclude about, our experience of longing is that we can find satisfaction, but it's only in part.
Okay.
Because complete satisfaction only comes when we think about like Paul in off the top of my head, I can't think of it. Paul in 1 Corinthians talks about this present age and the age to come, and says, now we see through a mirror dimly. When then we will see clearly. I think that's what we're talking about here with this satisfied but partially. I am satisfied because I can see it. But it's like getting out of a shower and the mirror is all foggy, so I can see a shape of it, but I can't really see it perfectly. That's what I mean by partially.
I just mean you can be satisfied, but you're still going to have times that you're not. People die and stuff like that.
Yeah, you still want. The idea of longing is not just something that Christianity gives an answer for and you no longer have to worry about it. The idea of longing is that if you are human, from the moment you're born to the moment you die, longing is a byproduct of your existence. Because we live in this experience, we have this experience, we live in this existence where it is complete wretchedness and complete greatness. Always in tension. In your situation, maybe this goes back to Daniel's question too, what you have doesn't determine that. Whether that lessens or whether it increases. We always long. But the question is, I've said probably 1,000 times just today, what is the object of our longing, and does it give us satisfaction that allows us now to be satisfied, but also to know that there are ways that we can begin to fulfill that longing that still comes. So the deep irony of Christianity is that we have complete satisfaction, but also we have complete longing now. Because we know what is coming, we know what is out there, and we know how to engage with the world. And now I desire nothing more than to do that. But also, that's still not, I haven't attained that yet, right? So it's this, I would call it a paradox. I hesitate to use that word because it's become the key word now ever since last year's Spiritual Emphasis Day. But it is a paradox. Complete satisfaction, but also full and complete longing is a part of the Christian experience. I think it has to be. That was Paul's and Peter's experience, I think. Right, Paul in Philippians 1, when he says, it is greater for me to depart and go to be with Christ. I long to be with him. but it's better for you if I stay. I mean, even the apostles longed, even after they accepted Jesus. So, yeah, I think that's a part of the Christian experience. So here's, yeah, we talked about that. Where are we at on time?
What time did it?
2:30. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about this. Lewis, when he talks about the complexity of longing, what we find is that it's very similar to Goldilocks. You're familiar with Goldilocks and the Three Bears, right? She goes in, eats the porridge. One is too cold, one is too hot, one is just right. That longing sometimes can be not felt. And so what's required? Like it's too cold, right? We don't feel it immediately. So what's required? I think it goes back to yesterday. Self-awareness. That acknowledgement of our wretchedness and our greatness so that we can achieve that. Sometimes it can be too intense. If your longing gets too intense, what do you think is a result? Like if that desire for wanting something so bad gets like to the point to where like you can feel it in your nerve endings, what happens?
You kind of forget to be grateful for what you have.
Yeah, it could be like the accumulation of things to fill that just so that you can get rid of that feeling. Because longing is not always like this really great feeling. Sometimes it's an ache. It's painful because you want something so bad because you don't have it. But yeah, you can just begin to like become ungrateful and just fill your life with stuff. Daniel, what were you going to say? I think distraction is a key part of that because if I feel too intensely, this like Christian Wyman refers to it as a burn of being, that like everything within me is on fire because I know that I want something that I don't have, then the easiest response for me is to go turn on Netflix and just kind of check out. Or to look to people to help me like remove myself from my own existence and my own experience.
Finding something to replace it.
Yes. Whenever I get stressed, which like stress isn't exactly longing, but like whenever I feel that too intensely, or whenever I don't know, whenever I want distraction, I might like say, hey kids, all right, get in the car. We'll take a trip to like Dairy Queen and just drive for a little bit and like get out of whatever experience or whatever situation I was in. Like you look to distract yourself or to fill something else with that to help that burn a little bit less, to help that intensity decrease. But usually when we do that, it's not the thing that we should be filling it with. But that's another story. Yeah. We'll talk way more about distractions tomorrow. I don't think that, yeah, we'll talk more about distractions tomorrow. Oh, I'm happy. I'm glad. But yeah, distractions will be tomorrow, and so we'll talk about those. I don't think that they're terrible. I think sometimes they're necessary. But when we make those, when we become reliant upon them, that can be difficult. I don't know if too much of them. I don't know. We'll talk about it tomorrow. I still got to think through some stuff. Okay, so what were we talking about? Intensity, yes, but just right. How do we get to that point? Self-awareness. But C.S. Lewis in Surprised by Joy has this phrase that he uses to illustrate how he became cognizant of like his longing nature. And he uses this word Sehnsucht. It's a German word, and it means something, but this is what Lewis says. He says, as long as I live, my imagination of a paradise, like heaven, will retain something of my brother's toy garden. And every day there were what we called the Green Hills, that is the low line of the Castlereagh Hills, which we saw from the nursery windows. They were not very far off, but they were to children quite unattainable. They taught me longing, or Sehnsucht. So like these hills that were just out of the reach and they couldn't get them, but they saw them, that's what taught him about longing. It was a catalyst of longing for him. It took that thing that was there, that feeling that was there, and it poured gasoline on it. Right? So, what do you think, yeah, we've got time. What do you think in your life are catalysts for longing? This is what I was talking about earlier with you, Bree, when you said travel. I think travel was a significant catalyst of longing for people. Because like they realize their wanting and their desiring by going to other places and like seeing Greece for the first time, or seeing St. Paul's Cathedral for the first time, right? Or seeing the Louvre for the first time, where you realize there's so much more to life, and now like I want nothing more than to eat all of this up. That I think is a catalyst for longing, right? With travel. What else? What do you think? was a catalyst for longing? Like, what are the things in your life that make you feel, that make you feel joyful, but also like joyful, like a joyfulness that is like outside of your experience, that it's not just like I'm happy, but it's beyond that. I don't know if there's better language for that, but that's all that's coming to my mind right now.
For me personally, it's like going to the levee in Speedway and watching the sunset.
Yeah. Do you remember we had an interaction like a couple years ago in Speedway? I was walking with family. It's okay. I don't remember it, but you do.
Good.
Oh, no one's checked in. But yes, but watching the sunset, like that is not cheesy because it's yours. That's all that matters. Like mine, I will always say a catalyst for longing for me are my kids. And that's cheesy. Like I talk about my kids all the time. Like you got to get over that and just deal with it. But it's true. It is. Whenever I think about my kids growing up, I immediately like long. Like I have that feeling. Longing is the word that I can put to it, but the feeling sometimes is joy, sometimes is anxiety, sometimes it's pain. It's hard.
You say music?
Absolutely, you could say music. How have you experienced like that catalyst of longing in music?
Just because I can relate to what they're saying.
Yes. With your experience connects with someone else, that is a catalyst for longing. I think also, if you connect with their experience that is like ahead of yours, or like what kind of Gabe was saying with movies, right? Like that is beyond yours, and say, my lack is really, really prominent in this moment. That is a catalyst for longing. Absolutely. That's a great one, Trey. Yeah.
When I'm like at the ocean, like we go on like surf trips and stuff sometimes, and like just being in the water and stuff because like God made all that. And
Yeah.
It's crazy that, like, so.
Yes. No, absolutely, that is. I mean, images usually are. Lewis refers to like the language for the catalyst of longing is that usually we call it beauty. Like we encounter something beautiful and then that like brings us into this other dimension to where now like I just appreciate it and I love it and I long for more of that. But he qualifies it's not just beauty, but that's a part of it. Absolutely. What else? I got to be honest. Food for me is a catalyst for longing. I'm being serious. Like the idea that there are meals that like I follow a bunch of like accounts on Instagram, right, of like local indie like food places, and the pictures they show, I'm always like, oh man, that looks delicious. Immediately, unattainable, but I long for that. Is that the thing I know is going to give me, or that I want to give me like complete satisfaction? Like this idea of like I'm satisfied or my longing is like fulfilled and complete? No, of course not. But I do long for that. Because I think that in a very real way, what Lewis says is that our longing for physical things are not the things in themselves that satisfy us, but they are the signposts that show us that our longing for food is really just like a temporary longing that just reflects this greater longing for something more. So my longing for food, for love, for sports, for competition, for music, for books, for movies, whatever else, those are just these signposts that say, okay, that's great, but also look beyond these. Like it's pointing to another thing. And I think that pointing to another thing is what we talk about here when we say, okay, what is it that we really want? That's my second conclusion about longing. It's just a quote. What do I want when I can't stop wanting? So what do I want when I can't stop wanting? It's a really important question to ask yourself. So, I would encourage you guys over the coming days to continue to think through this idea of sin-soaked and like what are those things that are catalysts for longing for you? Not because there's an assignment, but because I think that if you really think through those can be practices of like self-awareness or self-realization, which again is the key to understanding your experience. So, just a thought. All right. So here's what I want you to do now. Get out that poem, the poem that I gave you, Richard Wilbur, Hamlin Brook. because here's the last point that I want to make about longing and like what it is and how we experience it, is that I think that how we most encounter longing is in art. I don't just mean in like paintings, because like I like looking at paintings, but like I also don't. I'm not at the point where I can like look at a painting and be like, oh my gosh, that was sad. Like I long. You know, I don't know about that, but I don't know. But I know that exists and that happens, and that's great. But the way that I might do that is through like literature, through movies, through music, through photography, through other areas. Art is very big and broad. This we'll talk about in a second. So, longing in art. Has anyone ever heard of Ray LaMontagne? Ray LaMontagne is a singer-songwriter, and he has this song called Empty. If you have Spotify, Amazon Prime, whatever, Apple Music, listen to it. It is all about longing. The chorus is, I'm empty and unestranged, and then talks through and walks through like relationships, things that he's tried to fill his life with, and how they leave him empty. It's fantastic. No, he's not. Like, that's the thing, is that, and the other example I have with music is like the Stones, Satisfaction. That's a prime example of it. Exactly. Like, we think it's an upbeat song, it's fun, but like that song is super depressing. Because like the Rolling Stones have everything in the world, they have all the stuff in the world, but they still aren't satisfied. And not in the, well, I'm fully satisfied in Christ, and now my satisfaction like stokes even hotter, like it burns even more intense. Not like that. They're still trying to find something that gives them that more than momentary satisfaction. Yeah.
Like that's why I feel like the more you have, the more like you will you're like not content.
I would agree with that.
Like, does that make sense?
It absolutely does.
But like even like if you don't have that much, like I feel like it makes sense to long, but sometimes having anything like, you know what I mean?
I do, absolutely. Like the fact that, I think of Paul in Philippians when he talks about being content in all circumstances, like being hungry or being full, being rich or being poor, being in prison or being free. He's learned to be content in all circumstances. I think that content is like the satisfaction, right? That I'm okay with it. And he has nothing except for maybe a couple pieces of scroll and, the clothes on his back. Whereas if he had more, maybe that might breed that discontent, that I'm not content with all of this stuff, and so now I just need more. So I agree with you in that sense. I think that's there can be a lot of different cases of this, and I think that that's one of those. That's good. I agree with you. Think of literature. Not Catcher in the Rye, though that is one. Great Gatsby. Jay Gatsby is like the prime example of someone who longs. He did. It was bad. Catcher in the Rye, I think, Catcher in the Rye is one of my favorite books, and Holden Caulfield is like the epitome of longing. For me, because like what Gabe was talking about, like I had this experience when I read Catcher in the Rye when I was 21, to where I felt like I was reading my own story. Not literally, like I didn't deal with all of that stuff that he's dealing with, but the scene where he talks about, with the scene where he calls a prostitute, orders a prostitute, and then doesn't sleep with her, but just talks to her. Man. His parents sucked, his brother was in an insane asylum, and all his friends all sucked, and all he wanted to do was connect with somebody. And it happened to be a prostitute. That is remarkable. That is something it almost brought me to my knees when I read it. Because I realized oh my gosh, he just wants something more. And I felt the same way at that point in my life. And then we'll go from there. No, I didn't do that. But you don't be a jerk. But I saw that in my grasp for relationships, really all I wanted was connection, significant connection. So yeah, no, didn't order any prostitutes. Mostly because of the poor college student. After reading that, I probably would have tried it. I was desperate at that point. Who knows? I shouldn't say that if it's being recorded. Okay. So let's go to the poem. This poem is a picture, a perfect picture of what it means, of this idea of longing as we've told it. Because I think art best typifies our experience of longing, because it puts our emotions, our feelings, what we might not be able to articulate, into form. It gives it flesh. This is an example. At the alder-darkened brink where the stream slows to a lucid jet, I lean to the water, denting its top with sweat. I see, before I can drink, a startled inchling trout, of spotted near transparency. Trawling a shadow solider than he swerves now, darting out to where in a flicked slough of sparks and glittering silt, he weaves through stream bed rocks, disturbing foundered leaves, and butts then out of view. Beneath a sliding glass, crazed by the skimming of a brace of burnished dragonflies across its face, in which deep cloudlets pass, and a white precipice of mirrored birch trees plunges down toward where the azures of the zenith drown. How shall I drink all this? Joy's trick is to supply dry lips with what can cool and slake, leaving them dumbstruck also with an ache that nothing can satisfy. So, what is longing? How does longing manifest in this poem that you guys can see? What does longing look like in this poem? No, it's okay. Where do you see the idea of longing in this poem? Think about stuff that we talked about, right, today, all of this. Or maybe what's going on in the poem. The first 4 stanzas, right, 4 3/4 stanzas, are all about this encounter that he's having with creation. He dips his hands down to take a drink from the stream, and then that on the 5th stanza, that last line, how shall I drink all this? That's both literal, he's trying to drink it, and metaphorical, right? So when you say, I just want to drink this in, what do you actually mean? Yeah, I just want to soak it up, I want to take all this in. So how can he take all of this in at a single moment? Because this is like a snapshot in time that he's encountering. And then that last line, that last stanza, he says, joy's trick is to supply dry lips with what can cool and slake. Dry lips with what can cool and slake, right? It's like getting done with a really intense workout and it's in the middle of July and you're dying of heat exhaustion and then you get a drink of really ice cold water. Like there are very few things that are better than that. That's those first 2 lines. Leaving them dumbstruck also with an ache that nothing can satisfy. I think that ache is longing. Because now that I've experienced this satisfaction, it leaves me wanting more. That's the deep irony of what longing does. Human longing leaves us wanting more. And so when we go to this, reveals a transcendent reality centered on a personal being. What is the thing in this universe, in our reality, that can take all of our longing and continually satisfy us? From the Christian worldview, I think that response is God, more specifically, personal faith in Jesus. But from a human perspective, I think that when we encounter this life, that just leads us further into or towards that goal, which is Jesus, who can fulfill us fully, eventually. So the last stanza here, it just supports the idea that longing is only filled partially, and that it actually stokes further fires and further flames underneath us for more experiences. Think of it this way. In 8 months, you guys will probably be going off to college. Think about it this way. Think about the last night that you hang out with your friends before you leave for school. Some of you might not be thinking about that. That's okay. But the idea behind that, right, is it's not okay, we're going to have this, it'll be joyful, great, now I'm done. It's that the moment that you end that night and you're driving home, you desire more. You want more of it. But it might not be possible with your friends, but when you go to school, you get more of that because now you know what you want. I want connection. I want friends. I want substance. I want enjoyment. I want fun, right? That's a part of our human experience. When he says, leaving them dumbstruck also with an ache, that's what he's talking about. So, thanks, guys. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Tomorrow. That's right. Oh.